Hey y'all, Rowan here. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you've been doing well. I anticipated making a video much sooner than this, but life happens, you know. I do have several video ideas in the works, so please don't leave me just yet. But let's go ahead and get into what we're going to be talking about today. So we are here to discuss sort of a sequel to my last video, which is a VR to Green-Eyed Tarot, and it's going to be deep dive decks, but these are going to be oracles. My last video was all about tarot decks that I think are worth getting into, tarot decks that are worth spending time with, putting the effort into, doing the work for, reading the guidebook. And today we're going to be talking about oracle decks that bring that same energy. So let's just go ahead and jump into it. I've got a plan for later tonight. I'm going to be going and throwing axes with a very lovely gentleman. So I have to get this video done within an hour, and then I get to go put on some makeup. Not that anything of that is relevant, but I like to share with y'all. I'm sure you've noticed. But let's talk first and foremost about decks that you really want to read the guidebook for, because the guidebook is the meat of the deck. Like some of these are going to be decks where you work with the guidebook, but you let intuition take over. These decks that I'm going to talk about first, though, are ones that I really think that getting into the nitty gritty of what the author has to say about the cards really expands the intuitive hits that you can get from them. So the first one I'm going to talk about is probably a surprise to absolutely no one, because it is one I show on my channel all the time, and I talk about in just about every favorite deck, and that is the Wild Unknown. I have the pocket version here. I used to have the full size, but I gave it away to my brother-in-law when I found the pocket, or when the pocket edition came out, I should say, because it's so much easier to work with in this pocket size. So this is a deck. This is the Wild Unknown Archetypes. I don't think I said that. This is a deck that is made by Kim Kranz, the same artist of the Wild Unknown Tarot. And it's a round deck, as you can see, and it's the cardstock for the small version is much easier to hand over hand than the big version. It's much less clumpy. It does give you a lot of flyers, or jumpers, I guess is the better word for it. But I absolutely adore this deck. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the artwork. We'll hold it up close so that you can get the full experience. This deck is a lot of archetypes. It's broken up into suits. You have the selves, you have places, you have tools. I think, okay, so the guidebook is itty bitty in the pocket size, but the full size guidebook is much easier to like read. I have no problem with this tiny print, but the tiny binding is pretty annoying, and I can totally see people having issues with this tiny print if you're farsighted, or if you're, you know, any kind of aging over 30, I can see this beginning to get difficult. I'm almost there, so my time will be coming soon. But this deck has a very long introduction. The Ocean Within the Mountain is sort of the preface, and I think it's absolutely beautiful. Reading Kim Kranz's ideas as to why she made this deck really expanded my understanding of how to use it and what it can be for. And then, we were talking about the suits. So it's got, using the cards. Okay, so all of this front part here, sorry, let me center myself. This front part here is all about the deck as a whole, and then you don't get to card meanings until page 106. So there is a lot of information about the deck itself that is very worth reading, even if you don't go through and read every single card meaning, every single card write-up all at once. But we have the selves, which is easily the biggest section of the deck, and then we get into the places. After the places, we have the tools, and then you finish off with the initiations, and those are the weird cards that are formatted a little bit differently than the rest of the deck, and there are very few initiation cards. This deck does include a specific 5-card spread where you split the deck up into its suits and you draw one from each suit in order to get the like an overview of the situation or yourself or whoever you're reading for. And because it has so many different layers to it, this deck is absolutely worth spending a lot of, see, this is one of the initiation cards. It's formatted a little bit differently than the rest of them, as you can see. But this deck is worth chewing up for a long time. It's like, let the amylase in your saliva dissolve the carbohydrates in this deck so that you can extract all of the sugar from it. Maybe that was a bit heavy-handed of a metaphor there, but yeah, this is a really good deck for spending time with, getting to know, reading the guidebook, getting the author's intention. I mean, you don't see, it does make a bit of a mess, but you don't need to do that to get good readings with it. However, in my personal opinion, it really expands how you can use this deck. Let's take a look at one of the entries in the guidebook. We'll just kind of turn to a random page here. So we've got the shapeshifter. You get a hefty little write-up on it, and then you get some key words and phrases. When light, when dark, and then go deeper, which gives you some additional media that you can read into, and then you get some blurbs on the side that really sum up the message in there. And then there's keywords. I don't know how clearly you can see, but there's keywords up top as well. So there's a lot in each card that can be extracted and enjoyed. So that is the Wild Unknown Archetypes. I don't even think it's called an Oracle deck. I think it's just the Archetypes deck and guidebook. Yeah. So, tin version, love it. I carry this with me a lot. And then let's go ahead and talk about the Heavenly Bodies Astrology Oracle. Or astrology deck. It doesn't even call itself an oracle either. This is another one that is good for its guidebook. The guidebook here really teaches you the bare basics of everything that you would need to know about astrology, and I highly recommend getting into the guidebook before you use the deck for any sort of intuitive reading, unless you're already excessively familiar with astrology. Now, these two are mass market. The rest of the decks I'm going to talk about today are independent. So just, oh, no. We have one more mass market. Okay, let me shift some things around so that we can talk about all the mass markets together. But this deck, as you can see, has, so it's got all 12 zodiac signs. It's got all 7 classical planets. It has the 4 elements. It has the 3 types of signs. So like you've got your mutable, your fixed, and your, oh, I can't even remember the other one. But then it also has like, trine here, which represents the angle, a 120 degree angle between 2 different bodies in your star chart. So trine is a relationship between the different bodies that are showing up in the sky, based on angle. It's got all the houses, of the zodiac. So even though this is an astrology deck, it's not going to just be, those 12 cards. There's a lot more in here than just those 12. And because this is mass market, it's very easy to get your hands on, and it's highly worth it, in my opinion, if you are trying to dive into astrology and learn something. I do use this deck now for my monthly pulls, and there are probably other ways that I would use it, but it's mostly a study deck for me. It's not one that gets a whole lot of reading use. Like I said, I use it once a month, and then I would probably use this for clients under certain circumstances, but by and large, this is a study deck for me. Then, let me set this aside. Whoop-de-whoop. Wow, you can tell how old I am. That's embarrassing. The next thing I want to talk about is the Tantric Diini. This one is a beast of a guidebook. So this is a deck that is loosely based on the tarot system. There are no court cards, and then there's 3 extra cards at the end. So it's not the 78 cards of the tarot, although there are distinct 22 major arcana cards that really do line up with the major arcana of the tarot. And I've got mine in this little celestial bag here, this very poorly made celestial bag, camera cut me off, that I made for myself. I may redo this at some point, but I don't know. Some of the cards, such as White Lady, Mother of Pearl, this is a card that if I had not read the guidebook entry for the card, I would not know what the fuck it means. But these pearls here are meant to represent like breadcrumbs that this figure, who is a siren, has left behind, luring you into her cave. So this is a card that's all about the danger of pursuing things that are not necessarily good for you just for beauty's sake. Then there are other cards like Transformation, which is number 20, so it's part of the major arcana, and represents the Judgment card, but with a twist. And between the artwork here, the snake crawling up the gluteal cleft of a woman, and then we've got this, I don't remember what god this is, but this Hindu god here. They're all Hindu gods because it is the Tantric Diini Oracle. But this card is easier to read than White Lady, Mother of Pearl if you don't have the guidebook, or rather if you don't want to read the guidebook. Oh, let me mention that I have heavily modified this deck. It has white borders that I chopped off, and then I edged it in this deep purple color to match the backs a little bit. But the long and short of it is that this deck really shines when you spend some time getting to know the creator's intention. Not because the guidebook is excellent, but because in the guidebook there's a lot of descriptions of what the art is meant to mean. And in my opinion, that makes it much easier to read the art in different ways than what the guidebook illustrates. I would use this deck primarily, well, I do use this deck primarily for like shadow work and self-growth, spiritual growth things, but that doesn't have to be what you use it for. It's very flexible. It's very workhorse because it is such a large deck. I believe it has 64 cards in it, or 63 maybe, and because it's such a hefty deck, it's a good one. The cardstock sucks. I'm not gonna lie about that. It's flimsy as fuck, but it's a really good deck nonetheless, and it's one that I do recommend to anyone who likes collage art. If you've got more than one collage tarot deck, I heavily recommend getting your hands on this. If you practice any kind of spirituality or witchcraft, I recommend getting your hands on it. The write-ups for the cards are huge, though there is very little that's actually about the Tantric Diinis, Tantra or the Dakinis. And there's also a cheat sheet in the front that you can quickly reference if you don't want to read the big old write-ups. But I recommend taking your time, going through the deck, going through the guidebook, reading the descriptions of the arts and the intended purpose, and quite frankly, you'll probably get sick of hearing the word auspicious, or reading the word auspicious. The authors, I don't know if Nick Douglas is the one who wrote it, or if Penny Slinger is the one who wrote it, or if they wrote it together, but the write-ups are incredibly heady, so you kind of have to use your own wherewithal to figure out how it applies to your situation. But if you read the guidebook and you study the art, that will come naturally. And that's what this is all about, right? Like, what decks need you to spend time with them. So the next one that I want to talk about is an independent deck, and this one is for the guidebook and for just the study of color theory, and that is the Color Vision Oracle. I got this from a Riffle and Times shop, Cassandra here on YouTube, and this is a stunner of a deck. Oh, I've got some cards upside down here. How did that happen? It has both plain color cards and then what I'll go ahead and call keyword cards. So right here, right on the top, we've got plum, brown, peach, but then we launch into perspective, if you can read that holographic foil there. This deck is 78 cards big, if I remember correctly, and while you are, or at least I am, able to read it intuitively, I mean, there's not much artwork here to show its colors. It's beautiful, but you get the point, right? While you can read it intuitively, the guidebook has so much to offer that I think it's incredibly worth just sitting down and reading through the guidebook and letting the guidebook help you to make these connections between what is offered visually and what is offered spiritually. This is another one that okay, so this one has the opposite issue of the Tantric Dakini. The Tantric Dakini has write-ups that are very focused, and this one has write-ups that are sprawling. Like, look at this entry for soft green, which I think is actually called like grass green or something in the deck. It is full of typos. That is one thing that I'll say. There's a lot of little typos here, but nonetheless, it is a fabulous guidebook, and every time I pull out a card, I get an intuitive hit, I sit with it, and then I go to the guidebook, and almost inevitably that intuitive hit is mirrored in the write-up. For example, I pulled the card Terracotta the other day for a reading for a friend, and immediately I thought of clay. And then I went to the guidebook write-up, and it talks about malleability, it talks about change, it talks about the speed of change, and it talks about taking on the qualities of those around you to detriment or to betterment, and that's what clay does. So I do highly recommend spending some time just reading this bad boy and soaking in the color theory that is applied here. You get 1-page write-ups for the keyword cards and 2-page write-ups for the color cards. Next, I'm running out of space to put my decks that we're done talking about. Next, I'm going to talk about 2 together. Now, these are recent acquisitions of mine, and I have not yet worked with them properly because they both need a deep dive. I've been doing a little bit of work with the Supra Oracle from UC, or UC, which is the same company that makes the Pagan Otherworlds deck. And then this one I got, well, okay, so I got these in a set. They were a gift from a very dear friend of mine. And I'm just going to leave it at dear friend of mine because life is complicated. But these were a gift from a very dear friend of mine, a very indulgent and kind gift. Let me highlight that. I got them all in the set with the Pagan Otherworlds, and the Materia Prima, which is this one here, and is based on the periodic table of elements. This one I mostly want to just gawk at and admire. The Supra Oracle I want to use. The guidebook for the Supra is very esoteric. The Supra itself is very esoteric. There's a lot of overlap between some of the ideas presented here, and there's keywords, or rather titles, but there's not anything else to go off of other than the title and the artwork. It is in this parchment and black, I don't know if you would call this etchings or ink blots, ink blocks, excuse me. I think they're etchings, which are fundamentally the same thing, I guess. I don't know. I haven't been to art school yet. But some of these, like these shape ones are titleless. You just have to, like, the shape itself is the title. And so this one definitely deserves a deep dive into the guidebook. The write-ups are not huge, and like I said, they're all very esoteric. So this is definitely one that I would use for spiritual work. This is one that I would use for magical practice, but this can also be one, like if somebody is trying to ask questions about things that are perhaps bigger than standard, if they're asking like cosmic level questions, this and the Tantric Diini are both decks that would be super good for that. Then we have the Materia Prima, which I have not touched at all with regards to reading. It is still in order. Let me go ahead and put away the Supra and we'll get out the Materia Prima. But it is one that I don't know enough about chemistry to be able to just use it intuitively. So while I can, to an extent, jump off of artwork and titles for the Supra, the Materia Prima, I do not have that ability whatsoever. So this one is not just a request that you use the guidebook. This one demands that you use the guidebook. So I open them from the bottom to keep the seal intact, as I'm sure everybody does. And get all the cards out of there. Okay. This deck, if you put it together in the shape of the periodic table, all the pictures line up and make a bigger image that all works together. So that's really cool. This deck has artwork that sometimes makes intuitive sense based on, like, okay, hydrogen. We have a pregnant queen with a moon behind her, which really represents the potential for hydrogen, which is one molecule of, or not molecule, one particle of positive spin and one particle of negative spin. And it sort of represents the way hydrogen is the building block for all the other elements here in the table. From them, the rest are birthed. So we do see that symbolism here. Helium, we've got our little figure floating above the what I assume to be the, what's the word for a single molecule? Fuck if I know. But some of these make sense, like carbon here holding up the rest of life kind of energy, like this Atlas energy going on. But a lot of these nitrogen plants, a lot of these I don't understand. Oxygen here has fire indicating burn, but I'm guessing that these two people perhaps represent passion. But then we get into the elements that I'm less familiar with. Phosphorus, that one makes sense to me. Here, sulfur. I don't get this sulfur card, and I'm definitely going to be diving into the guidebook. In fact, let's go ahead and take a venture into sulfur, which is card number 16. Let's see here. We'll just go to the front. Sulfur is on page 153. And it says, regarded with mistrust for good reason, sulfur is an earthy, all too earthy spirit with a excuse me, I'm dyslexic, with a sickly, alchemic aura. Coarse and not the least bit nostalgic, she is a progressive entity. At her most inventive, she is a brilliant, organic collaborator, always in the highest demand, working her peculiar medicine into the very skin of the world. But in the wrong environment with weak and greedy partners, she is thoughtlessly destructive, turning her medicine into a venom that robs from the wind and rain all its wealth and comfort, leaving a barren path of illness and misery in her wake. A combination of restraint, respect, and understanding is needed to stand eye to eye with the all-powerful sorceress to create a lasting and beneficial relationship for all. Diva, temperamental, mercurial, changeable, passionate, and headstrong. So, like, it does tap into the way the chemical or the element works to make chemical reactions, and it uses that in order to create meaning for the cards themselves. And since I'm not a chemist, this deck is definitely one that needs the guidebook. If you are a chemist, this deck may be one I do highly recommend it. If nothing else, as a collector's piece, even if you don't read tarot or oracle, if you are a chemist and you have a passion for chemistry, this is something that is worth owning. But that is the Materia Prima. So those are the decks with the guidebook heavy focus. Now let's talk about some that do have guidebooks and do demand guidebook attention, but that's not why we're talking about them. These next three are decks that I think require an intuitive relationship with the cards themselves in order to get the most out of. The first one is the Momento, Mori, Lenormand, and Oracle. This one does come with what is the equivalent of a little white book. It gives you a small write-up for each of the cards that is primarily keywords, if not exclusively keywords and key phrases. I got this card off of Cassandra A Riffle in Time's shop as well. But this deck is one that you should spend time with even if you are a seasoned Lenormand reader, because it does make changes to what each, well, not what each, but what some of the Lenormand cards are, like, called, and then getting to know it on an intuitive level, because some of these cards sort of overlap. Like, there's a couple in here that speak to otherworldly communication. There's one, tasseography, or something like that. I am just not braining today. Telling the future, fortune telling through tea leaves. And then, you have your man card, your woman card. There's a dog card. There's also a cat card, though it's not part of the Lenormand section of the deck. But because there's the T divination card, there's also a Ouija board card, or a spirit board card is what it says, because Ouija is the brand name. There's a spirit board card, and then there's also a card that's like the door, child. And I do think that spending time with the deck allows you to, see, here's the door, differentiate between what each of those crystal ball means to you, right? So crystal ball and whatever the fortune telling tea leaves card is, those are ones that are, I have edged this deck, by the way. Those are ones that are going to be very similar in meaning, and it's your job as the deck owner to create differences in how you interpret those cards. And so for that reason, this deck demands time, energy, and focused use. I do use this with tarot, but I also like using it on its own. This is a deck that benefits from multiple cards pulled at once rather than only one at a time. So it's a meaty one to get into for sure. Next up, we have the Zammer Twins Oracle. I have the 3rd edition, which did come with a tiny little guidebook that has really good write-ups. There is a digital guidebook for earlier editions, and quite frankly, the guidebook to this deck is a necessity because there are several cards in here that, this one's been edged as well, that demand you understand the difference between them and the other cards that may seem similar. I think there's 3 different cards in here, like, that are about pretty women doing pretty women things. And then there's several cards that are about various demons. There are cards that, different types of archetypical characters. But because this deck is so in its lane, like the monkfish. I don't know what that means. I don't know what a monkfish is. Did they make that up? I don't know. Let me go to the guidebook. Okay, let's actually do that. Let's do the guidebook for the monkfish. This is card number 17. Where did I set my silly little guidebook? There it is. So for card number 17, the write-up that we get: sheltered from the storm by a golden rainbow, the monkfish makes his way across the sea. Transformed by his faith, he proceeds unaffected by the rain to spread good news to new lands. Hope, protection, renewal, physical and spiritual connection, wakefulness, opportunity, abundance, good fortune, fertility, and a new beginning. Reversed meanings are hopelessness, feeling hopeless, spiritual rejection, misfortune, poverty or lack, infertility, and final or finale. So after reading that write-up, I would definitely create my own relationship with the monkfish card. There are several cards in this deck that are about spirituality, but you really, again, similar with the Memento Mori, you really have to spend your time with them to understand how they're different from one another. And the guidebook, quite frankly, is not all that helpful in that regard. What you really want to do is create a relationship with the deck that is independent and all about you. So that is the Zammer Twins Oracle. This is by the same guy who does the Deviant Moon Tarot. It can be obtained on the Patrick Valenza, the Patrick Valenza website, deviantmoon.com, I want to say. It's a good one. I have not spent enough time with it because I have not given it its proper study. And then finally, perhaps this one is a bit self-indulgent, but this is a deck that has grown and shaped the way that I use it through its own voice, and that's my own deck. This is the Mixed Metaphor, Mixed Media Oracle deck that is available on my Make Playing Cards page, Rooted Rowan. This deck is poker-sized, and it's another one that really benefits from drawing multiple cards at once, but you don't need to. I like to get this deck has the same, I don't want to say problem, but the same characteristic that the last two do, where some of the cards just sort of overlap a bit much, and that overlapping isn't because they are all the same, but because the minutia in the details of each card are meant to portray different things. There are multiple cards about socialization, multiple cards about curation, multiple cards about the ways in which we hurt each other. But if you spend time with it, you'll eventually get to know those differences and be able to appreciate them for what they are. I know, I'm pretty sure nobody owns this deck except for me, but it is one that as I have used it with, like, I'm currently writing the guidebook, but as I've used it just on its own, my understanding of what I created has deepened so much, and I find this deck to be absolutely stunning. I find it very supportive, and I frequently use it when I'm doing client readings. So this isn't only one that I use for myself. This one's one of my favorite cards. This isn't only one that I use for myself. This is one that I happily pull out for other people, and that is the Mixed Metaphor, Mixed Media Oracle. So that's all I have to talk about today, and I am getting close to out of time on this little segment, so let me not keep you too long. If you would like to see more videos from me, I do have more videos in the works. So go ahead and subscribe if you would like to see those. If you enjoyed hanging out with me talking about Oracle today, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up and comment below any Oracle decks that are in your collection that you would like to spend more time with, or that you feel greatly changed your perspective on when you did spend more time with them. I don't think that sentence was structured correctly, but you know what I mean. I will also link Green-Eyed Tarot's original video and my original tarot-themed video below. And then, of course, I will also link Mixed Media, Mixed Metaphor, and the website where you can purchase it. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I look forward to being back soonish. Mwah! Bye.